Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. Today's date is January 22nd, 2024, and if you've been following this channel, you'll know that we've been covering the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic since the beginning. Over these last 4 years, we have done many standalone videos covering articles about the spread of SARS coronavirus 2, the many effects that it can have on the body outside of just immediate death if you catch it, the political decisions that went into prioritizing the economy over people's health in the face of this globally circulating airborne pathogen that can compromise the immune system, cause brain damage, lung damage, heart damage, diabetes, seizures, a whole host of conditions affecting basically every system in the body. We've also covered this frequently in the S4A live streams. We've put up community posts sharing the COVID-19 wastewater data for the USA, which currently in January 2024 is at the second highest level of spread ever, second only to the December 2021, January 2022 Omicron spike. COVID is not over, very far from it. It remains the number 3 leading cause of death in the USA, second only to heart disease and cancer, both of which it contributes directly to. In the case of heart disease, it can damage the heart itself as well as the blood vessels because it causes all kinds of clotting disorders. And in the case of cancer, SARS coronavirus 2 can attack and kill T cells directly. The only other virus that does this is HIV, which causes AIDS. While the overall mechanism and effect is different between HIV and SARS coronavirus 2, some of the observed effects are similar, with people showing signs of immune dysfunction like not being able to fight off relatively common pathogens with the same ease that a person with a healthy, non-compromised immune system would be able to do. So over the last couple of years, there's been a rise in cases of fungal infections that normally are very rare. And then also cases where relatively common pathogens that don't usually cause a big problem, like RSV, or this recent round of white lung pneumonia. Instead, those are hitting people harder than usual. So with reference to cancer, guess what else your T cells are needed for? And these are things that may not kill people outright immediately. But over time, and especially what we know from the reinfection data, is the more reinfections you get, the more your odds of developing a negative health outcome rise. And with respect to the damage that the virus can cause in the brain, it's been observed to cause overall brain mass loss, shrinkage, and also to age the brain by up to a decade. So the amount of years that are being shaved off of people's lives with getting infected, well, we know that US life expectancy dropped significantly since the start of the pandemic, and it still hasn't recovered. Consequently, we have been recommending evidence-based protection for people like wearing an N95 respirator or better, a KN95, an FFP2 or 3, a P100. These are all similar, very high-quality filtration standards, and you should use those every day, and especially in a surge, because now people have gotten it in their heads that COVID isn't a big deal. I can just get infected. Is it going to kill me? No, it's not going to kill me. Well, the initial infection may or may not kill you, and that depends on a number of things like what age bracket you're in. But even if you're younger, like 30s or 40s, it could still give you a heart attack like a few months after you get it. And even if you survive the heart attack, that is going to set you way back in terms of your health, the amount of energy you're going to have, the kind of activity that you're going to be able to do. And that's not what you want in your prime of life. So plan A is in N95 we trust. Don't let the virus into your body. Then there's also the question of filtration, ventilation of the air in different settings, and also just avoiding super spreader things, even if you are wearing a mask, if you can avoid it. So that's plan A, because the only surefire way not to get long COVID and the associated organ damage and major life setbacks is to not get infected with short COVID in the first place. But beyond that, plan B is to stay up to date on your booster shots, which is about the best that we can do. Now, in terms of a public health response, the Joe Biden administration has basically just turned this over to individual choice. Well, that's not public health, that's individual health. What they should be doing is sharing the kind of information that I've been sharing here at every bus stop, supermarket, school, mall, etc. As we've seen, Vax and Relax has been insufficient to stop the spread of this thing. So the actual response has been complete capitulation, where there should be a mass education campaign, again, putting this information in every kind of public space imaginable. So it's here that we turn to a comment that I just got. So, honest question here. You know, the kind of honest question that needs to be prefaced with honest question here. They continue. I love your critiques of power, but, well, wait. So we don't just critique power here. That's not what Marxism is about. It's about a very specific subset of critiquing power, which is studying class struggle. In capitalism, there is a ruling class, the capitalists. They own the means of production. That is the workplaces, all of the industrial infrastructure, the raw materials, etc., as well as the capitalist state, which was erected to maintain this capitalist order. Now, what are the capitalists trying to do? They're trying to exploit the proletariat. The overwhelming majority of the population, which is composed of dispossessed workers who do not own capital and therefore have to sell their labor power in exchange for a wage or salary in order to purchase the essentials of life, shelter, food, clothing, and all of the other commodified essentials and non-essentials of life. Okay, so that's more what we're doing, studying that specific system, and then how does the proletariat fight back, being the revolutionary class in capitalism, which has the potential to displace the capitalist class and then take over running society. So when we're talking about, defending the interests of the proletariat or, advancing the interests of the working class, is health one of those? Is living a long and disease-free life in the interest of the working class? Yes, that's one of the basic measures of quality of life, standard of living, whatever you want to call it. Because in the end, your life is really all you've got. If you lose your life, you're no longer in the game. Or if you're still alive, but you're so sick that you can barely move for a few hours a day, well, that's like living death. So is it in our interest as socialists to be attacking the capitalist response, which is letting, in the interest of just having the economy run and keep generating profits for capitalists, letting an airborne, highly communicable virus which can cause death and disability to be spreading unchecked? Yeah, that's in our interest to question that, to attack that, and to call for action against it, to get a real public health response going that will actually protect workers' health and lives. Okay, so continuing. But why, when it comes to COVID, do you push all the main talking points and quote studies, not studies, studies in quotes, conducted by the powers of capitalism? What? So here's how science works. Science is real. It is constrained by capital. Yes, funding can affect what studies go into effect and what don't. That said, it's not like all science is completely on the tightest leash imaginable. Capitalists know that no matter what scientific findings come out, and no matter what research is conducted, if they don't like the implications of what, the public health response should be, etc., well, they have the political power to just, misdirect people or to just take the spotlight off of it. But it doesn't mean that people who work in biology and pharmacology and all kinds of other related disciplines aren't conducting real research with real, valid, materially viable findings. So I think that what's happening here is somebody confusing knee-jerk contrarianism with actual critical thinking. These are not the same thing. So to answer this question directly, why when it comes to COVID do you push all the main talking points? So loaded language from the start and quote studies. This person doesn't think that any scientific studies, no medical research is valid, and that it's all conducted directly by the hand of capital. That is just simply not how the system works. If you want to understand medical research, health research of any kind, here's what you need. You need a background in biology, maybe chemistry, maybe some medical knowledge, anatomy, physiology, etc. And then whatever you don't have directly in your head, you need access to other outside resources, reference materials, other experts you trust who actually do have the direct training in whatever special fields are relevant to the particular research. If you're not able to interpret that yourself, then you also need to know about research methods, epidemiology, how to evaluate research studies. There is a certain inbuilt screening process as far as getting something published. It has to be peer-reviewed. That is, at least if it's in a peer-reviewed journal. There are some other ways to get things published that are more just sort of, vanity publications where you pay a fee and boom, you're quote published, but it's not the same process, and so on. So if you can navigate all that kind of thing, then you can evaluate the studies. You can read the study and say, was this a quality study? And do their conclusions match the data that they're presenting? Now, for me personally, having some background in this kind of area, I am able to read these research studies and reach some kind of conclusion that I have confidence in as far as, was this a good study? Do the conclusions match the data? Was the experiment design appropriate to the research question that they set out to study? And so on. So that's critical thinking, is when you actually get into the evidence and the reasoning and you say, is this quality evidence? Is it quality reasoning? Does it match up? Is the hypothesis confirmed, or is it contradicted by what this research showed? So that is some of the process, some of the steps involved in looking at health and medical research and evaluating it. So the short answer, I share studies that I think have legitimacy. And I tend to go toward research that's shared by individuals who I think are on a similar track and whose work I respect and who I think are using a correct reasoning process. So like on Twitter, for example, there is an extensive long COVID community of researchers in immunology and other disciplines, virology, that are relevant to the COVID-19 pandemic. And I've been following their work for some time now. And after you see that people are consistently putting out information that, you can evaluate independently to some extent, and it seems to be solid consistently over a period of time, well, those are the people I'm going to keep coming back to, and those are the research threads that I'm going to follow the most. And that's the kind of stuff I've been sharing. If you go back over the COVID updates and the live streams and the standalone videos, that's the kind of stuff that I'm sharing. And it's why I continue to track the wastewater and why I continue to mask and why I keep recommending that you mask, because all the evidence points to this being a serious situation. But you don't even have to dig through the back channels of Twitter, the back alleys of underground long COVID research that, in fact, is being neglected by the, quote, powers of capitalism. Because let's just take that on its face right here. Is anything that I have said in this video so far echoed by Joe Biden, his COVID czar, the CDC, for fuck's sake? They might acknowledge it in passing here and there, but they're not leaning on it. They have folded up the pandemic response, in fact. So there's a real difference, and I really want to drill this into your head, between criticizing a public health campaign for actually not following the data and for capitulating to convenience and business as usual on the basis of actually looking at the health harms of this virus. And just standing back and being like, well, people with power are saying things and I don't understand them, and I'm just going to question everything. So let's continue, especially when it comes to the capital of the pharmaceutical companies. Well, I don't actually cite a lot of pharmaceutical company studies. And like I said, Plan A is a mask. That's not a pharmaceutical. And Plan B is the vaccine. Plan A is always keep the thing out of your body. And then Plan B is, if you do get it, make sure that your vaccines are at least up to date. However, I haven't been super thrilled with the level of protection provided by the vaccines. They do have some efficacy, but it's not 100%. And it's not 100% against long COVID either. But seeing as how protecting your health is not a black or white issue, but an issue where you put together many protective factors, that you get 5% here, 10% here, 20% here, and you assemble them all, cobble them all together into the best protection you can get. Yeah, a vaccine is part of that. But it's not what Joe Biden's saying, just vax and relax. Get a vaccine, take your mask off. That's complete bullshit. It hasn't stopped the virus from spreading, and it hasn't stopped the virus from mutating. We are better off for having the vaccines over not having them, but they are not the magic bullet to ending this pandemic, which again, currently, 4 years in, has the second highest level of spread in the US of all time. So continuing, I'm not a COVID denier or anti-vaccine person. So how would you differentiate these? Because you don't seem able to really evaluate the situation. So what is your stance? Because you're putting studies in quotes. You think that all the studies are just completely made up. They're just total fiction. So how are you not a COVID denier or anti-vaccine person? See, people say this. It doesn't fool anyone. You're not fooling anyone by saying that. You're just a merchant of doubt. That's all you're doing. It's just like starting it out with honest question here. Just start out, if you either leave it out or just say, hey, complete bullshit here. Bad faith question here. Because that's how I read it. And you look like a fucking chump and a liar. So anyway, however, I question all, in all caps, all information put out from these institutions. No, I don't think you do. I think that what you're doing is not questioning on a careful, detailed analysis of the evidence and reasoning. I think that you're just doing knee-jerk contrarianism of somebody I don't know said something, and I'm just going to basically put it in the false pile. Note that there are no examples given here. Like, for example, this study said this, but I think that it was a flawed study because of XYZ. And they could have approached this question better by setting up the experiment in this way, or, they said this about the immune system, and that's not actually how those kinds of cells work, etc. So as far as questioning all information put out from these institutions, you can't reach any valid conclusions by just being a knee-jerk contrarian, because capital does not exclusively lie. They may twist things in order to suit their agenda, or they may suppress things in order to suit their agenda, which is to say their material or class interests, particularly in this case, exploiting the proletariat and pursuing profit. But they don't just exclusively lie. And doing that kind of knee-jerk response is the opposite of careful and critical. In this case, you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and it makes you look ignorant. So for example, the capitalist class, how do they handle COVID for themselves? Well, so there's a hashtag trending, Davos safe. Why? Because when the richest people in the world get together, they protect themselves from SARS coronavirus 2. They filter the air. They use UV light to destroy the virus, and so on. Now, there are meetings of government officials and so on that don't do this. It's not exclusively across the board, but you do see it. So why do they offer those protections to themselves? Oh, well, it's so that they live longer and healthier lives, which is in any human's interest. And why do they deny it to us? In fact, downplaying that the pandemic is even still going on. Simplest answer, it would cost them a lot of money. They'd face major political outcry to do more. The existing crisis of confidence in the overall US system and in capitalism generally would expand, because opening themselves up to being held to any kind of higher standards is not in their interest. It can complicate everything. So if you're really interested in questioning, quote, all information, well, I don't know that that's true, because you don't seem to be actually questioning what is the dominant public health response? What is the dominant political messaging? And does it match up with the published research on SARS coronavirus 2 and the COVID-19 syndrome and the long COVID syndrome, or PACS, post-acute COVID sequelae? So I have done some of that comparison. I don't think they match up at all. I think that they are deliberately downplaying the severity of this pandemic, which 4 years in is circulating at a very high level, doesn't show any signs of going away on its own. And this kind of uncritical contrarianism is not helping the situation one bit.